Good day, everyone. We are down to Chapter 3, Lesson 4, which is establishing test validity and reliability. Without further ado, let's talk about test validity.
Lesson 4, Establishing Test Validity and Reliability. So when we say test validity, it is the extent to which a test, such as chemical, physical, or scholastic test, accurately measures what it is supposed to measure. It means that test validity is done to measure scholastic tests if they are done correctly. Test validity said a test is valid when it measures what it is supposed to measure. Validity pertains to the connection between purpose of the test and which the data teacher chooses to quantify that purpose. Example, if a quarterly exam is valid, then the contents should directly measure the objectives of the curriculum if a scale that measures personality is composed of 5 factors. Then, the score on the 5 factors should have items that are highly correlated. If an entrance exam is valid, it should predict students' grades after that first semester. It is better to understand the definition through looking at example of invalidity. Example, Colin Foster, an example in mathematics education at the University of Nottingham, gives the example of reading test that meant to measure literacy that is given in a very small font size. A highly literate student with bad eyesight may fail the test because they cannot physically read the passages supplied. Thus, such a test would not be a valid measure of literacy, though it may be valid measurement of eyesight. Such an example highlights that the facts that validity is wholly dependent on the purpose behind the test. More generally, in a student plagued by the weak validity, it would be possible for someone to fail the test situation rather than the intended test subject. We are down to 7 different ways to establish test validity. Validity can be divided into several different categories, some of which relate very closely to one another. And now let us discuss a few of the most relevant types. One of it is content validity. Content validity is when the items represent the domain being measured. Content validity refers to the extent to which a measure represents all the facets of a given construct. For example, a depression scale may lack content validity if it only assesses the affected dimension of depression but fails to take into account the behavioral dimension. The procedure of it is the items are compared with the objective of the program. The items need to measure directly to the objectives for achievement or for definition or the scales a reviewer conducts for the checking. Example of it is a coordinator in science is checking the science test paper for grade 4. She asked the grade 4 science teacher to submit the table of specification containing the objectives of the lesson and the corresponding items. The coordinator checked whether such item is aligned with the objectives. So with that situation, we formulated some questions. Number 1. How are the objectives used when creating test items? Objectives are used to identify what should a class can meet after the lesson. Question number 2. What is the content validity determined when given the objectives and the items in a test? Number 3. What should be present in the test tables of specification when determining content validity? A test has content validity if it measures knowledge of the content domain. How is content validity determined when given the objectives and the items in a test? A test has a content validity if it measures knowledge of content domain of which it was designed to measure knowledge. What should be present in a test table of specification determining content validity? The answer is table of specifications provides the teacher with evidence that a test has content validity, that it covers what should be covered. Who checks the content validity? The standard method for assessing content validity involves judgment by subject matter experts with expertise in the content of the test. Two or more SMEs rate each item, although large or diverse tests may require different SMEs for different items. Now we are done in content validity. Let's move on to phase validity. Phase validity is done when the test is presented well, free of errors, and administered well. It means that phase validity is the extent to which a test is subjectively viewed as covering the concept it supports to measure. It refers to the transparency or relevance of a test as it appears to test participants. The procedure of it is the test items and layout are reviewed and tried and laid out on a small group of respondents. A manual for administration can be made as a guide for the test administrator. Example situation of it is the assistant principal browsed the test paper made by the math teacher. She checked if the contents of the items are about mathematics. She examined if the instructions are clear. She browsed through the items if the grammar is correct and if the vocabulary is within the student's level of understanding. In that situation, the formulated questions are: what can be done in order to ensure that the assessment appears to be effective? The answer is directly relate to the learning intentions or particular learning outcome. Question number 2, what practices are done in conducting phase validity? And question number 3, why is phase validity is the weakest from all validity? The answer is it is the easiest form of validity to apply to research. However, it does not generally include much, if any at all, in the way of the objective measurements. Therefore, it is often criticized as the weakest form of validity. Now we are done to phase validity. And let's move on to predictive validity. Predictive validity, a measure should predict a future criterion. Example is an entrance exam predicting the grades of the students after the first semester. Predictive validity also say it is the degree to which a test scores accurately predict scores in criterion measure. The predictive validity says predictive validity is the degree to which a test scores accurately predicts scores in a criterion measure. A conspicuous example is the degree to which college admission test scores predict college graduate point average or the GPA. The procedure of it is a correlation coefficient is obtained where the x variables is used as the predictor and y variable as the criterion. Example situation of it is the school admissions office developed an entrance examination. The officials wanted to determine if the results of the entrance examinations are accurate in identifying students. They took the grades of the students accepted for the first quarter. They correlated the entrance exam results and the first quarter grades. They found significant and positive correlations between the entrance exam scores and grades. The entrance examination results predicted the grades of the students after the first quarter. Thus, there was predictive prediction validity. The formulated questions are between these two measures. Number 3, how can we determine if a measure has predictive validity? So, the question number 4, how can the test result of predictive validity be interpreted? Predictive validity can be interpreted through the indication of extent to which individuals' future level on criterion predicted from the prior test performance, and validity indicates the extent to which the test scores estimate an individual's present standing on the criterion. Let's move on to construct validity. Construct validity means the components or the factors of the test should contain items that are strongly correlated. And the procedure of it is The person R can be used to correlate the items for each factor. However, there is a technique called factor analysis to determine which items are highly correlated to form a factor. The situation example is a science test was made by a grade 10 teacher composed of 4 domains: matter, living things, force and motion, and earth space. There are 10 items under each domain. The teacher wanted to determine if the items made under each domain really belong to that domain. The teacher consulted an expert in a measurement. They conducted a procedure called factor analysis. Factor analysis is a statistical procedure done to determine if the items written will load under the domain they belong. Example is measurement of the human brain such as intelligence, level of emotion, proficiency or ability. Construct validity is valuable in social sciences where there is a lot of subjective. Construct validity is valuable in social sciences where there is a lot of subjectivity to concepts. What should a test have in order to verify its constructs? Construct, construct validity is usually verified by comparing the test to other tests that measure similar qualities to see how highly correlated the two measures are. How are the results in construct validity interpreted? To achieve construct validity, you have to ensure that your indicators and measurements are carefully developed based on relevant existing knowledge. The questionnaire must include only relevant questions that measure known indicators of depression. Now we on to concurrent validity. Concurrent validity is when two or more measures are present for each examinee that measures the same characteristic. The procedure of it is the scores on the measure should be correlated. The example situation of concurrent validity is a school guidance counselor administered a math achievement test to grade 8 students. She also has a copy of the students' grades in math. She wanted to verify if the math grades of the students are measuring the same competencies as the math achievement test. The school counselor correlated the math achievement scores and the math grades to determine if they are measuring the same competencies. The formulated questions are needs to be available when conducting concurrent validity. The answer is concurrent measures in the study are taken at the same time. Number 2, at least how many tests are needed for conducting concurrent validity? At least 2. Generally, one assessment is new while the other is well established and already been proven to be valid. What's the Let's move on to convergent validity. Convergent validity says when the components or factors of a test are hypothesized to have a positive correlation. The convergent validity is a correlation is done for the factors of the best. Example situation of convergent validity. A math teacher developed a test to be administered at the end of the school year, which measure number 1 sense, patterns, and algebra, measurement, geometry, and statistics. It assumed by the math teacher that students' competencies in number sense improve their capacity to learn patterns and algebra and other concepts. After administering the test, the scores were separated for each area, and these 5 domains were intercorrelated using person R. Thus, positive correlation between number sense and patterns and algebra indicates that when the number sense scores increase, the patterns and algebra scores also increase. This shows students' learning of number sense, scaffold patterns, and algebra competences.
Okay, and that ends my report. I am Janma H. Salama, your discussant for today's topic. Thank you and God bless.